I don't pay with cash, I pay with card, but I do actually still pay because stealing is wrong, right? That's a code of conduct, right? So societal values, they're changing. How do we keep the values? Then I'm thinking about reading and writing, and who is at fault? Is it us, the parents? Is it schools? Who isn't educating people to understand that we have to still care? You see, years ago, and I'm just going to finish on this note. Years ago, everybody had this faith, right? Everybody went to a particular church or synagogue or a mosque or whatever they went to pray in, or stayed at home and prayed, but they had faith. Faith is a book of rules. Faith tells you, I do this, this, and this because it's the right thing to do. But it also says, I go to a community. I walk into a church where I know people. People know me. I embrace that communication, right? What happens, and this is, again, my flippant nature, what happens when we lose community, right? When we stop not seeing that Fred isn't in that chair anymore. Fred, who was always there, Fred's disappeared. Where's Fred gone? Somebody better check on Fred, right? But guess what? If we don't go to church and we don't know Fred, who's going to check on Fred? And I believe that we're losing that neighborhood social interaction because they've all got heads in things that are multicolored and very exciting the last 3 minutes. And and I just want to ask people, where do we find community in this single world of, because that's not community. We're talking today, there's people in the room and we've got people on the stage. Thank you everyone for coming. It's really important that we say, this is society, this is community. It looks different, and it's not a church, and it's not and we can blaspheme if you need to, but preferably not. But no, there's no rules and regulations within reason, except for whatever reason rules and regulations we're under from any, as is in charge. But the most important thing is that we are seeing this kind of relationship developing. We are seeing this type of community. But how does this exist outside? How does this exist outside? In the UK, churches are closing literally weekly, daily. They are crumbling buildings. They might have been the most beautiful architecture once. Our local village church has got an order on it that says you can't go near it because the walls are falling down. Nobody will pay to have it repaired. The roof's been stolen 3 or 4 times. The lead's all gone. It's stainless steel now. It's too heavy, so that's not helped the walls. And that's the end of that church. And now there's all these gravestones in this church. And, it's just so sad. And I just want to say this, finally. The last time I did the flowers at church, the vicar wrote me a beautiful note. We were away that weekend, but I did the flowers on the Friday. She said, myself and a lone sparrow thoroughly enjoyed the flowers. Please never spend that amount of money again. It was wasted. No one turned up. Her and a sparrow and my 30 quid of flowers, which I was quite grumpy about. But the point was, she'd rather I put it in the plate, as she said, which fair play to her. And a bunch of roses would do. That was the attitude. Now, I just want to ask people, and how can we make those changes better? How can we make our life for those changes? So on that note, I'm going to shut up because I've said everything I wanted to say. I hope my video sort of laid out the premise of the room. And if it works, I'll do it again in future, because I think it's really useful if people really understand what we're trying to achieve. So over to you, Mr. Osung.
Let me do some welcomes and say I have to go to Cyrus because he only has a few minutes and then he
Okay,
has to go.
quickly.
That's all right. Then I'll go
Right.
to Owen. So Felicia, welcome. That's my mother's name. So glad you're here. I think somewhere deep down, the real question that we're asking today is this. Say we blamed our parents for making us poor, but your kids blame you for making them poor. Whether that's financial poor, whether that's mental health poor, mental wellness poor. That's a real question we're asking today. Yeah, I'll leave you with that. Francesco, welcome. I see you, of course. Say, Paulette, your sight is as bright as ever. You shine. You're so considerate. That's you, Paulette. That's you, right? And of course, if you want to join the studio, the link is there. It's in the comments, and also it is in this section, comment section of the event page as well. Well, amazing Jackie is here. Jackie says, Sean's shows. Well, Leslie's show starts today. Sean's show in the middle. Paulette's show, she didn't mention Paulette's show, I don't think. But Jackie's show, Just Jacks, is on tonight. So that's the last thing we tend to do on a Monday night for me, anyway, right? So make sure you check out the show and join. There's always an interesting guests that Jackie has. Dr. Lisa, hello. So we're talking about burnout later on today and your metamorphosis. So do join us then. We'll talk
Tomorrow.
tomorrow. Sorry, I get all confused. It's Christina today. What's about the architecture of building a business online? I suppose that's what it looks like, right? So Meryl, welcome. Happy Mother's Day. Yeah, it's an American thing. We haven't got Mother's Day. It's not Mother's Day here.
I take it. I'm like the Queen. I have two of them.
It's not Mother's Day here. When is Mother's Day here? End of the year, isn't it?
March. March.
Yeah, March. Okay, so very weird when Americans suddenly pipe up with Happy Mother's Day. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, but it's good of you. So what does Francesca say? There's so little time left to communicate. No, there's a lot of time to communicate. That's what I think anyway. Mr. Cyrus, kick us off, please.
Hi, everybody.
How do we avoid this mental wellness crisis, the mental health crisis that seems to be destroying society like a wave?
Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, wherever you are. So first of all, my name is Cyrus. I'm the CEO of Whisperboy, and it's a pleasure to be here. Paulette and Annie, I can see your live events has been going from strength to strength, and to the point, someone like me who's a constant learner, can't you just say hello and just touch base? And in these live events, I have learned more than I've taught, and that's a fact, and I'm really happy about it. You talked about Paulette. In your initial talk, you mentioned about community, and community is all about togetherness, right? So people who care about you and people who value the community you have created, they will turn up even for 1 minute. Okay, I am at work and on borrowed time. I have to go back quickly. So just very quickly in 1 minute, I just wanted to say, in response to the question that I just asked, how can we solve this crisis? It's, of course, the crisis is not lack of communities. It's communities having been a little bit fractured and stressed. So what do I mean stressed? So from a physical point of view, stress is the constant pressure something or someone is under, right? How much pressure you apply to that person or object is how much pressure you apply on it. So how fast can we resolve this issue? Well, um, my answer to that question is how much time are you spending on it? It's like um, you use the word education and educating, Paulette, which is where the focus needs to be. Educate education comes from the Latin word educare. That means to bring up. So as you can see, same as the process of bringing anything up is a constant um, um, uninterrupted process. It needs to be. And so the more we spend time on educating our community, our maybe we could use the word togetherness instead of community, right? Because we are all together. At least I have been with you guys have been together for the past 2, 3 years now, and which I'm really happy about. So the more you spend time on it, the faster it heals, and whatever it might be, right? Lack of education, poor education, and I have to go. And before I go, I just wanted to say, whatever the root cause may be, right? I hope it gets resolved and it gets healed up. Okay, I hope your pain heals up as fast as Donald Trump's right ear did. So, thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Cyrus. Funny as always. Listen, get back to work. Don't get into trouble. Thank you for dropping in. Annie, can you hear me? You're speaking and you've got on mute.
Yeah. No, I
Okay.
wasn't speaking. I was mumbling
You're
to myself.
laughing.
Yes,
okay.
mumbling to myself. Now, interesting, Mr. Cyrus. Interesting.
Always.
Yeah, always.
Fractured is a good word, though. I think fractured, as opposed to broken, is a slightly better word, because we can. If we break a leg, it needs proper surgery. If it's fractured, it usually can mend itself. So maybe that is something that is really worth thinking about. So yeah, thanks for that. I appreciate that. Thank you. So,
sure.
Annie, should we go to Ollie?
Let's go to Ollie.
Ollie, over to you.
Thank you so much, Paulette. It's such a blessing to see you, and also in the audience, and also Cyrus, Paulette, Annie, and Sean, and everyone here. I'm really a fan about languages, and first it starts with the words that I'm telling to myself. I realize that sometimes I throw to myself acid instead of seeds of growing flowers. So, by instance, raising children, raise, elevate. And do we raise children by throwing acid, or do we raise children by planting seeds, by instance, of listening, of critical thinking? The way that I'm really passionate about language, especially French, and I'm going to see my new language colleagues in less than 9 days, so it's about physical contact in Sitges, Spain, that brings my heart into really high vibration. And it's about critical thinking. The way that I'm doing that, it's thanks to my French teacher, that I'm passionate about languages. For instance, Brave New World, books like and movies like Metropolis, and amazing other movies and poetry, and I think in order to answer to your question, I think there were is and will always be times of change. Do we blame people that still wants to be with their horses instead of cars like 80 years ago? Like, do we blame people to use AI rather than to ask an expert, a doctor? I think it's also about creating spaces of non-judgment, of listening, of understanding each other's, not blaming, not shaming, spaces where we can express our darkness also without any judgment or blame or shame, because nobody is perfect. Everyone, including me, everyone on earth has their own demons to fight. And if we are in silos, and if we are in silence, we are not going to solve this. We are going to solve this because we are sharing with people that care. That's also important, to choose your environment. What I would like to say also, what is in my control? I cannot really change whatever happens in the world, especially with the Donalds and the Vladimirs and the whatever. But I can just act on myself right now. The past and the futures are and the future are other planets. So I'm a bit like philosophical, but it's about creating a space where we can share to each other with listening. And that means also that we have one mouth and two ears to use in proportions. So I can talk and talk and talk, but I'm going to leave the space. And you are always welcome to DM me. My door is always open, and it's such a blessing to see you, everyone here. Thank you, Paulette, for the space you are creating. And Annie, of course, savor the flavor. No, that's Kenny.
Thank you. I think the art of communication and language is so important. And if we lose the interest in language and we lose the interest in people, then we have the community fractured, right? So we need to work out a way to re-engage with that community in some way. So change is inevitable. We all accept that. But it's, how does that affect everyday life? How does that affect people? How does that affect how we go about life, how we do life, right? It's about doing life. Philippe, I've got to tell you, your dog is adorable, but I'll talk to him in a moment. Sean, are you there? Was it your next, my lovely?
Ollie, I will say I agree with you about the critical thinking gap. So I was talking to Coach Sean earlier, and I think that something just tells me, yeah, as much as as well as many of the other things, we have lost a bit of reality. When I left uni, I didn't go straight into a HR job. I didn't. I'd say now, literally, my first job was in a shop, then another shop. Then building a kids' playground, and then onto a building. So I could carry on saying I've done many jobs, washing up. Right. I think today there seems to be this expectation. Life is easy. Success is easy. Everything is easy and instant. So I mentioned when I was talking to Coach Sean earlier, we need to realize that life is a complex web of ups and downs.
It's back again.
Yeah, life's about going around in circles, literally, right? You go up, you go down, you go forward, you go backwards, you pivot, you change. That's what they said, right? You change. We have to adapt, and we're just not giving our kids the realities of the need to adapt. And definitely, and when people don't adapt, when they don't expect challenges, almost like they are more brittle, more anxious, more easily spooked by things that are going to happen, right?
Anxiety has become the biggest word. I read an article in you may even get it, Psychology News, and it stated that anxiety was the word for 2025. Can you believe it? That was the most used word, was anxiety. And that means that we're now putting the word anxieties with everything. I've got this anxieties, that anxiety, that, that's how it becomes the norm, if you like. I think one thing, critical thinking, I absolutely agree with, but I think problem solving is the thing that my job was problem solving. I was an excellent problem solver. That's what I did for a living. Now you'd put that problem perhaps into a machine, and maybe a machine could solve that problem quicker than me, who knows. But the answer is that, as we change, as we evolve, how does it affect the community, society? That's the bit that I'm really hanging on to with like my fingernails to try and understand. So, Sean, are you available to speak now, my dear?
Coach Sean, we can't hear you.
He is.
Yay, you're
Yes,
there.
I'm here. I was doing graphic tech support for my wife, so I figured turning the mute off and the camera off was better. And I was actually starting to post on the comments about this. As everybody was talking, I was thinking, Cyrus, you talked about the etymology of words, and I thought about I always learned community with unity. Turns out it's actually Old French that means, where is it? I lost it. But it comes from an Old French that also means with unity, right? United in a shared fellowship, intercourse, as Paulette was highlighting, actually talking. And I feel like this is a trend that I've seen is we just don't talk to people anymore because this stupid thing is even sitting on the table. You don't even have to be buried in it. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a restaurant and I see a family and minimum half of the family is like this. The kids are like in their phone like this the whole time. And I'm like, stay on the couch. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. And in my home, we have like tech free times, tech free zones. We sit down to dinner and my son fights it. He's like, why can't I just watch this video? Like, this is our solid rule. This is our boundary. Like, we're sitting down to have dinner or have time together as a family. We're all off of it because it is a distraction. And I think, Paulette, you were highlighting how there was this cognitive increase year after year until 2020 COVID times, and then it's been falling. I think that era exacerbated this because it shifted everybody to more screen time, right? We met with colleagues on a screen. Kids went to school on a screen. And on the main topic, is learning entitlement or a choice? I have a little pushback here because that question to me indicates, like, is the problem access? And I would say not primarily. What I've seen in founders, executives, and people I work with, and in my own self at various points of life, is the real variable is identity. In other words, does the version of myself that's running the show right now have room for growth? If it doesn't, no resource, no program, no encouragement, none of it will stick, right? I see a lot of what's happening in school is instead of going to learn, it's like, just let me get through the day. All right, let me just get to the end of that final bell. I can go home, or at least, get the bell where I can go for recess and go play with my friends. So I think that's like, we've got to look at our personal identities, our cultural identities, because we are in a world where AI is everywhere. It's prolific. As Paulette was sharing about coding, was showing an app I coded for myself to save money to grab snippets from podcasts. So I could collect a knowledge base, we'll say. Because as we noticed in the comments, everybody's statement was there were a lot of statements about time, 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 time. And I was talking about this on my show today. Time is the resource. Each one of us gets 525,600 minutes every year. You can't save it. You can't earn more of it. So it all comes down to, what do I do with that time? Do I use that time to connect with people at deeper levels, which means this crap in another room, and focused attention? Because the world we live in today is designed to pull our attention away. So I would put it down to one thing: presence. And I yield the mic.
Whew. Yeah, presence. That's so important, and such a. I think people want to be present. I think they do, but I think that there's a pull, right? I've had children when I've been counselling who really struggle with school, really struggle, and getting them out the front door with panic attacks and stuff like that. And I used to say to them, get to break, right? Get to recess, get to break. Then from break, you get to lunch, and that's a win, right? And then from lunch, you get to the afternoon break. And then guess what? It's home time. And if you break it into smaller little pieces, you can eat it, right? And they would generally I would have something nice here for them, because it was part of the reinforcement. It's a bit like training a dog. You're training an animal in the same way you're training a human in the same way. There's a sweet there, right? Break it into 4 pieces. Why am I breaking it into 4? Because you have to. Because if you imagine your day in 4 pieces, you just get through 1 piece each time. You get to eat each piece as you go. That makes a child understand that they can get to the end of that sweet, and it's the end of the day. I'll tell you now, one of the biggest fights is going on at the moment is education in the UK. The schools are taking the phones off the children in the mornings, and they don't get them back until the evenings. So guess what I've got now as an anxiety to handle? When can I get my phone? Not the anxiety of getting them out the door to school, but it's the loss of the device, the drug. How can I get to this? Well, let's break the day down. Let's have a sweet and break the day down, Not the panic attack of getting out the door to go to school. Now it's I need my fix. And I think that is something that we really have to understand when we talk about societal change. My panic attack child, my child that really couldn't get out that front door because of fear, now the fear is losing control of their machine, not having I need it. The relationship with this has become scary. And it's interesting, my son lost his phone, and I'm telling you, when I say lost it, it was in the house somewhere. It got it turned off so it wouldn't answer the thing. I've never seen him in such a state. You'd think he'd lost $1 million, And I'm saying, well, can't you just phone it? And no, Mom, it's not switched on. And I said, well, doesn't your iPad find it? No, it doesn't. And gosh, the sofa was up in the air, and everything it was honestly bedlam. And I was looking at him thinking, if you'd lost $1 million and you were reacting in this way, I would understand it. But it's your bloody phone, right? With all respect, sir, it's a phone. It will turn up. You've not left the house all day. You had it this morning. It will be somewhere, right? Guess where it was, guys? It was in the toilet. He had to put it down at some point. I don't even want to talk about why, but he had to put the phone down at some point. But he'd been happily sitting there scrolling for some while, put the phone down, and the phone was on the toilet. It had gone underneath, and you couldn't see it. I have never been more ashamed of my son in that moment. Not the fact that he was scrolling on the phone while he was on the toilet, because apparently that's normal behavior, I'm told. But and he was trying to get all his friends to write to me and tell me it was perfectly normal to use the phone on the loo. And I was like, I don't need to know really. But it was the fact that the reaction of losing that gadget was like, unbelievable. So for me, that was a biggie, big understanding of change. Felipe, he's going to come through the screen in a moment. He's so gorgeous. Right, over to you, Felipe. Talk to us, educate us. What do you think? Felipe, can you hear me?
I'm sorry, somebody was speaking to me. I didn't hear that last part.
Sorry. I said your dog is coming through the screen at me. I want to just tickle him.
he is attracted to your voice, Paulette. He hears your voice and he's like, "Who's that?"
Hello,
and he's
baby.
like,
Hello.
nobody else. He's looking over there now to see he hears.
Hey. Hello, gorgeous.
he other people's voices. He's like, "Oh, I'll sleep here," but he hears your voice. He peeks up. He's like, "Who's that? Where's she? Where's she?"
Hello, gorgeous. Hello.
Yeah, Copper?
Isn't it
She's
funny how much we communicate with our animals? Just think about that for a minute, guys.
He's over here,
They
Copper.
they don't use phones, right? They don't use gadgets.
He's looking out the window for you now.
I'll have to ring the doorbell in a minute.
There you go.
So what do you make of all this?
I've been loving this conversation because there's so much great insight that's been shared between Sean Michael and Sarah and you and Annie. My big takeaway is I've been struggling with this and I've always thought about why. I always thought, why is this happening? And one thing I realized is that if I grew up always having a cell phone as a child, I'd probably be a little more attached to it. It's kind of like, the way I look at it is, if I left my cell phone at home, not the end of the world. If I leave my wallet at home, I panic more. But I've always had a wallet with me. That's been a part of me. So I think part of it is that we lived a big part of our lives without cell phones. They haven't. So I do think that. But to your point about community, I've been thinking about this for years now. Ever since COVID, obviously, like you all said, it's compounded. It's made people that were not as comfortable going out, it made it easier for them to stay in. And virtually made it even easier. Now, a virtual community is so valuable. I value my LinkedIn community so much. They are my LinkedIn family. I call them on the phone, a lot of them, and I share a lot. And so I do value that friendship. But there's a small piece of that connection that's missing, is that person to person. And once we have that, that makes a difference. So curiosity has always been my thing, is be curious about other people versus focusing on yourself, because that's one of the reasons why I wrote my children's book. The children's book that I wrote, that was partially inspired by you and doing yours there, Paulette. I gotta give you credit for that. I'm now finished my second book, and it's gonna be a series of 5, but it's all focused on backyard adventures, because I wanted the children to remember, go outside, use your imagination. Don't use a device. It's a book, you can read it. Yes, it's on digital too, but the stories talk about adventures I took on place in our backyard, and the real adventures, a lot of them focus on imagination and curiosity and problem solving, skills that I want my children and grandchildren to remember in the future. And so what I think is that quality is more important than quantity. And I learned this morning listening to Leslie Flower's show. She was talking about, she had a guest on, and they're talking about critical thinking versus emotional thinking. And I think that's part of the why that I've started realizing, is that one of the things they explained was emotional thinking, you're very judgmental on yourself. Whereas you think about yourself critically, you remove a little bit of that emotion, and it doesn't give you that anxiety that you mentioned earlier. And when I think about myself and the things that I want to work on, if I'm being critical and analytical, I'm going to come up with a solution and be more of a problem solver. If I think of it emotionally, I'm going to be a lot more emotional and judgmental myself. And the reason I'm sharing that is that I think that's part of the challenge of people wanting to go out and engage with community, is that they're so emotionally judgmental on themselves that they're not being compassionate enough to themselves to allow them to say, hey, you know what? Everyone's got issues. So stop thinking about it so emotionally. Be more critical, saying, hey, I'm just going to go out to a location, have fun, meeting some people, have a drink, eat some food, and come home. Just very analytical. And that removes the emotional fears that people start inserting in their minds. Because once you start doing that, it goes haywire. And so one of the things that I've realized is that self-discovery is great, but not if you shame yourself during it. So you've got to have confidence in yourself to go out and engage the community. And once you do, that's where your confidence grows. You meet new people. You come back home, you realize, God, if I had gone out, I wouldn't have ... And so the other things I think people have to think about is the hybrid workplace, the whole battle of that. That's hurt it too, obviously, but I don't think we should go all remote. I don't think we should go all in. There should be a happy medium of hybrid, because being engaged with people personally makes an impact. If it has to be 5 days a week because the industry requires it, great, that's fine. If it doesn't, let's have some flexibility, because when people put themselves in uncomfortable situations, they gain confidence. And in order for community to grow, we've got to put ourselves in those uncomfortable situations, and then we'll see the benefits of it. But a lot of it is anxiety driven. And I think that when people focus on that, it ends up being a lot more, they end up having a much more difficult time. And they psych themselves out of participating in community events. So one of the things that I always tell myself, and I share this on all my shows, is that 5 things I always remind myself of is that be confident in what you know and the experience you have, because no one can take that away from you. Be curious about what you don't know, other people, what you don't understand, technology, and go learn it. We have so much resources. You don't have to look it up in the Encyclopedia Britannica like we did growing up. We have resources. And then the next 3 are: be grateful for what you have because you have more than others. Be compassionate to yourself like you would be to others. And be tenacious as hell because you got this. And once you have that tenacity to overcome it, you go out there and engage community. And once you engage community, that's when we can start building it back up and have it be more meaningful. You know, I don't want to go out to happy hour 5 days a week because then I might have a drinking problem. But would I love to go out once a week, happy hour, to meet up with a group of friends? Absolutely. It'd have to be a reoccurring event. Those little opportunities are great. And the last thing I'll say is this: if you're waiting for someone to invite you to that opportunity, stop waiting. Take it yourself and invite people to go out. If it's 1 or 2 that show up, who cares? That's part of a community. So I'll end it there, Paulette and Annie. Thank you for letting me share. I do need to go move my car, so I'm going to leave in a minute.
Thank you very much for coming. I think 2 or 3 things you brought up there, which I think are really important, especially for me personally. Being curious, absolutely 100%. That is a must. But think about how you speak with your children, how you've spoken to your children over the years. Now I want you to say to yourself, how will your children speak to their children? Now, because you spoke to your children in the way that you did, and because Sean is doing the same as we did, which was there were no phones around the dinner table, we sat and conversed. So that's what you're going to do. And your child, as much as he may fight it, will appreciate it one day, right? And he will hopefully pass that on as well.
But you know what also is that our upbringings influence us. I was brought up, I'm the youngest of 5 children. We grew up screaming and yelling at each other and arguing constantly. When I met my wife and we moved into our home, she said, you know what, when we have kids, I'd like to raise them a little bit differently than the way you were raised. My parents were amazing, but the way that we yelled at each other was chaos. I said, I don't want them screaming at each other. I want them to talk things out, get mad at each other, that's fine, but can we try to do that? And because of her, we were successful. Because if I had not heard that, I probably would have just gone with what I knew. And I think that, so my reason for sharing that is just because you were brought up one way, yes, that is how they might learn, unless you change the pattern from how you were brought up.
Interestingly, Ben brought home a friend from school years ago, and we used to have some sweets on the side because Ben was never bothered with sweets. I was one of these parents that believed that if you everything in moderation. So, you know, we'd leave them up on the shelf. If he asked, "Can I have something?" We could have something from the sweetie jar, but it was there. It wasn't. It didn't have to be hidden. It was there, and he would just ask because that was the way he was brought up. I came in the kitchen and found this child like hanging from like a monkey, hanging from the top of this unit, trying to swing to try and get the sweetie jar. And I was like, George, what are you doing? And he was like, nothing. I was like, what do you want? And he was like, I'm after that sweetie jar. I said, why didn't you ask? And then immediately I just shook it out. And he was like, and he was grabbing handfuls, and I was like, what is wrong with this child, you know? And it turned out he was the youngest of 8. And that was the way they were. If you didn't grab it, someone else did. Ben, being an only child, he was like, okay, so I've got all those sweets. I'll just choose that one. Thanks, Mum, and walk away. And that wasn't because he was an angel. It's because there were no other kids to fight him for the sweets, right? So he grew up in the same kind of way that Felipe's talking. And I just said to George, in future, if you just ask, then I can supply you with whatever you need, right? But you don't ever climb up there because you could hurt yourself and fall. And he was like, it's all right, I'm a good climber. And I was like, yeah, but not in my house. I don't know if that helmet can hold you. So please get down and ask me nicely, and then I will sort you out. And then another time, I remember his parent, the mother said to me, oh, your son is so adorable. And I was like, oh no, what's he said? What's he done? And he said to her, I'd love a baby brother, but my mum can't make them, and you're very good at it. And I was like, oh, well, he meant it in the nicest way. And she said, oh, he's only 6, I understand. And all I could think of was, thanks for that, Ben, you know. But the point is that was a child who was the youngest of 8. She was very good at it. And they did fight for everything, you know. If there were sweets, it was like a dive on whoever got there first. But I imagine, and I speak without knowing, but I imagine that family would be the family that would sit at the table and not speak to each other and have the devices, because there was no interest in each child, because each child was being brought up by the child that was older. Does that make sense? So it was like the older kids were bringing up the younger kids and bringing up the younger kids. So I don't know, but I would imagine they would be very like gadget driven family now, because they just weren't really that bothered. They just made children. They're very good at making them, but they were equally not very good at managing them. And I did say at one time to Ben, I don't know if I can cope with him. You know, I almost had to be like following him around to see what he was going to get up to next, you know, that sort of kid. You know, just curious about what's in that box. Well, that's the ashes of our last dog. Can you please step away from that box? It's got nothing to do with you. And by the way, why are you in my bedroom? You know, it's like the weirdest sort of things that you would imagine, but behaviors differ from family to family, just as Felipe said. And in the same way, society differs from year to year. We are understanding of that. But I think the core of what I worry about, and I'm going to say something political now, right or wrong, but I feel that unemployment is at an all-time high in most of the world, if you look at the numbers. And education also at an all-time high. There are more kids going to university, more kids going to college. There's a reason for that, I feel. And I feel that they're all doing these degrees that have got absolutely no bloody use whatsoever, right, in the real world. but they've been put into university and suggested that's the right thing to do because you're above the average, grade. So you should go. They have huge debt, and then you come out of that university with this degree in geography and go and work for Asda or whatever as a driver. It's like crazy. If you get a job, there are so many students who are going, I have a degree in whatever and I want to work in criminology. And they're like, yeah, but there's only so many jobs in criminology and it's dead man's shoes, because when you've got a job in criminology, you stay in that job. So guess what? There are no jobs. So we're churning out 6,000 criminologists year on year for no reason. So my friend's daughter, criminologist, actually my goddaughter, you know what she's doing now? Accountancy. She's done a flip and got into accountancy. And I'm like, well, why didn't you just go into an accountancy to start with? Because I really thought I'd be a criminologist. I wanted to, find clues and like, don't laugh at me, Annie. Like, I mean, I'm being deadly serious, right? Great, you've got a geography. No, but listen, hang on. You get a geography degree. You don't need it. The
You do, Paulette. You can't say that. You can't say that. You can't say that. You can't. I tell you, look. I used to kill people's dreams. They will say, "I want to do this." I'd be like, but have you thought about right now? I don't do that, right?
I will. I'll do it.
Look, it's about adapting to the circumstances, right? A degree is only the start.
£75,000.
Yeah, but you can create. It's a platform. The degree is not about the subjects, but how you learn to think, to create. Right? The fact that we then hand over our brain to an AI platform, that's our fault. Right, and let's go back a couple of steps now to build what Sean and Philippa were saying. Say, look, how many of us really have dinner time? Really, I can't say I do. I have different time, and I have any time to eat, right? And we've never sat. Well, my wife and kid might sit around the table. I never have. I never sat at a dining table ever. We've had it for the last God knows how long, right? Literally had the dining table since 2009. I've never sat in it, not once.
Correction. We had dinner time, but we don't sit around the table.
Right. I said, not many people have dinner time. I saw it yesterday. I went to a friend of mine's house, and they were sitting on the dinner table. I was like, wow, that's amazing. Right. I said, we don't have that time of being present, as Coach Sean said. With the people we're with. I think that's half the problem. And also, this curiosity. So I think that's probably the biggest thing I'm going to take away from today. Again, our kids are not curious because the parents are not curious. The parents are not learning. They're not asking. They're not doing the things that we need them to do. That for our kids to learn to do. That'd be the problem, right? And again, how many people do we know who scream mental health? Give me some tablets. At the drop of a hat, and then the kids learn the same thing. That's when if you look at it, people sort of think or try to paint the picture that this mental health, call it what you like, tsunami that we suddenly came from nowhere. No, it's been coming from years. The last generation took to pills, and the ones before them took to pills too. And now it's just come home to roost. It's here. Everyone now needs a diagnosis. Everyone. Almost if you haven't got a diagnosis, the parents feel like they've failed. As I said, again, that's us giving our kids a problem. That's us robbing our kids of the things that we accuse our parents of robbing us of, the chance. And look, Philippa mentioned dealing with challenges, having tenacity. Again, I would ask how many adults do you see who don't have any of that? Paulette, in the UK, how many adults just happy to claim benefits and just
Yeah, but
Just relax.
this is where we're coming to the point now where, and this is an important issue that we need to also address, probably not today, but at some point, is there is a huge, great big gaping hole in the economy. And that is the demographics, okay? The demographics are that there are less people paying in and there are more people living longer, right? That means that we've got to keep these people in pensions, keep these people in healthcare, keep these people alive, blah, blah, blah. Ben wants to cure cancer. And I did say to him that if you do that, I will kill you personally, because that will add millions more people to the deficit that we'll need to keep paying for, right? And he was joking and it was a big laugh. But the point is, yes, that's his dream, is to cure cancer. But you know what? We're curing more and more diseases, and we are. I mean, I'm being flippant, but the point is, we are curing disease. People are living longer, and it is fantastic that they are, but they're not self-sufficient at an age, and therefore they're reliant on state. And the state is already broke, right? We're you know, the economies of scale are very clear. The basic economic states that you cannot take out more than you put in on a regular basis and not end up in the red, right? We are so far in the red that we can't borrow anymore. Our debt has become the point, and the states is the same, that your debt is so big now that people are looking at, now, is it safe? You know, you get downgraded by how safe your money is if you borrow, right? And people are going, with the war and this and that going on, is states, if they put up any more bonds, can we buy them? And how safe are those bonds? The same thing with the UK. Our debt, the debt is so high that how can we borrow any more money? How can people say, yeah, have some more money, and they know for sure they're going to get back? So, you know, if we have unemployment, which we have to pay unemployment benefits. If we've got kids that have gone to university, have got this huge debt, this 75 grand that I talk about, that's the minimum, by the way. But let's say it's 75 grand. They're not getting any of that money back because they lent that money to those kids. It's not a gift. They lent that money. Those children are supposed to, the adults are supposed to, and then pay back to the state out of their wages education. But if they haven't got a job, are they not paying back into the state? They're actually taking out the state because they're taking unemployment benefit, or they're working for ASDA or whoever as a delivery driver, right? If they get the job. So the big issue we have here is it's an societal. Should not stop pushing people into jobs or into university and further education and not look back at what skills do we need? Builders, electricians, plumbers, you know, the skill sets that really, they're almost guaranteed work for life, because there's not an AI machine that can do that. We can't
Paul,
press an AI bot.
I need to jump off, but I just want to, because you bring up really good points. And I do think that skills-based hiring is becoming very predominant. My prediction is that we're going to see trade schools increase because skills are important. But the university, look, my minor was in criminology. I use so many of those skills in my job in HR, it's not even funny. So my point is that, like and he said, that's just the start of opening up your mind to learning and getting skills. It's up to you to keep on doing that for the rest of your life. And I think so that university experience, it's not a waste. It's a lot of money, don't get me wrong. And I wish it was much cheaper. It should be. Education should not cost that much. But for was it your niece, I think, or whoever it was, they
goddaughter.
They still have value to what they got there, because I know so many people that got degrees, and as a recruiter, I used to go college recruiting, that didn't even go anywhere near the field that they got the degree in, and they're still successful. So, but the last thing I'll say is this, and I have to go, is
It was actually a requirement of her. She told me it was a requirement of her getting the graduate trainee scheme, was that she was a graduate. So the degree got her in the door.
The job, yeah, and that some jobs require that, absolutely. And then as far as mental health, I've shared my story in the past. What I want people to realize is that the medication should be a bridge to get you through that difficult time. We call holistic medicine natural ways of helping your body. It's got a bad stigma. Honestly, I like the philosophy of put your big boy pants on or big girl pants on and focus on yourself so that you can get off the medication one day and do it without using it, because nobody wants to stay on medication for the rest of their life. And there are natural ways of doing it. And we talk about it here all the time. So I just want to encourage people that don't be afraid of using medication, because it helps. Trust me, I know. But it's not a crutch that you want to live on the rest of your life, because you don't have to. Some people need crutches the rest of their life. This is not one of those crutches. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you for letting me share that, you all. Appreciate seeing you all, and have a great rest of your day.
See you soon. Take care, Felipe.
Bye-bye.
On the medication thing, again, I'd love to point that out, that there is a shortage, because the amount of people who are on the drugs for antidepressants and the sort of ADHD, ADD, anxiety, autism spectrum disorders, whatever you want to call these things, because they've all got so many different names. But the drugs are in such short supply because the volumes needed cannot be met. And when you realize that they're changing them from Adderall to this, or from that to this, or they're changing them all the time to get cheaper, or can we get some from somewhere else that are made from a different factory that will kind of fill the gap? Because the young people that are on them, especially young students, and then just into further education, and then sort of starting their jobs, there's no way they're going to let that crutch go. No way they're going to let that crutch go, because that crutch is getting them through all these different scenarios, all these different transitions, all these different changes. My issue is, we perhaps needed to have a different process at the very beginning, that we didn't give them a tablet. We didn't speak about, hey, listen, there's this pill you can take and it will really calm you down, right? Or there's all these different ways in which we can regulate you, right? Because all I see is dysregulation. And then if we can regulate you in a different way, I always use the oven, and I always call it, like, imagine when you start to feel yourself getting a little bit way out of control, or you're feeling like it's all getting too much, your oven's on a 10. We need to turn it down to a 2. And you have to do that yourself mentally. And you can do that by talking to yourself and saying, right, I've got to turn my oven down. I know that. How do I do it? I know I'm going to ask to go to the lavatory. I've got a pass. That's the way you do it. You get school to give you a pass that says at any time you need to take 5 minutes, you can. That 5 minutes pass is to breathe. You go and you do your breathing exercises that you've been taught. And guess what? You come back into that class on a 2. And you sit down and you get through the lesson. And then all you have to do is get to the next break, and then it carries on. And I have seen people without any medication whatsoever, but have learned the 5 things rule. Think of 5 things from this color, or look for 5 things. Or I've done everything I can to distract. And when you throw those distractions at a mind that is going, I can't cope, and you go, slow and breathe. And they look at me and go, why do you always go on about breathing? Breathing's it. I say, listen, do you know what happens when you stop breathing? And they look at me and they go, you die? I go, right. So that's why breathing is so important. And now let's learn how to breathe properly. And then we breathe through so much of these issues. And then they leave me and they go, I went to sleep last night. I did 4 lots of breath work. and I get texts saying, I did this, I did that, I did this at work. It works. It works. And I'm like, I know, we need to get a letter to your teacher that says you need a pass, and we think we can solve the issues of behavior, right? But that is just one tiny little weeny problem that we have, right? The twits, as we call them, the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, people in the office that only work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. Mondays and Fridays they work from home. So basically they get a long weekend, right? That's the attitude. Now, whether we like it or not, that's how it is seen. And I've got issues with it, but you know what? Whatever. I got so much from being in the office. I got so much interaction, so much laughter. I mean, I have laughed and I've almost peed myself with where someone said something and then someone else has interjected, and before you know where you are, you're laughing, and you've had a real wonderful time with your colleagues. But now you're doing this Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday thing. That's going. You're losing that interaction, because maybe on that Tuesday you're working at a client's, and that Wednesday they're away, so you might not see them for a fortnight. It's like being on holiday, what it's like when you come back. You sort of feel difficult. You've got to try and find your way back in again, and I think that's happening every week. People are trying to find their way back in, and I think that this whole IT era, that yes, 2020 caused us more issues than we'll ever know. 4-year-olds having to have screens to do kindergarten or to do like we call reception, and then other children in different rooms watching their classes, and then the parents working from home as well. Can you imagine, like, a family of 5, 3 kids spread around the house in their bedrooms doing their work, and then parents at home working in separate rooms, and they're all using the internet, and the internet's as slow as heck, and it's a real hotbed of horror. And I get all of that, but now that child at 4 years old was given that toy. They were given that drug at 4 years old, at 5 years old, at 6 years old. They all got given it. And they might not have been given one till they were 12. My son wasn't given one till he went to the senior school at 12. Because I felt at 12 years old, he needed to let us know if there was a change in something going on after school or something, because that was how he communicated. He didn't have a phone in order to play games. He had a phone to talk to us. What's happening now is from 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and onwards, that is where the phone started getting into everybody's lives. The screen, Zoom, and all the various calls that we did, everything became, as you say, Sean, screen led. And that screen led does not, as much as I can say, oh, I really like Sean, he's a great guy. Yeah, I don't really know you. I've not had a coffee with you. We've not laughed ourselves silly over something stupid that's happened in the office. I mean, Annie and I have met face to face, and we have laughed ourselves stupid. And that's important. I wouldn't love Annie as much as I do and care for him as much as I do if I hadn't met him and built that relationship. And I hate him sometimes, but I love him most of the time. The point is that the truth of relationship is getting to know people. And going back to the very beginning of our whole conversation, is society. We're losing community, society, and that bond that we used to have. And then from that point, we've then got to ask ourselves, how does education come into it? How does the education of, and he said, whether it's or Felipe said, is it emotional or is it functional? Are we using our critical thinking, or are we using our emotional intelligence, or not intelligence, maybe emotional anxieties or whatever? I get that, absolutely. But that's a hell of a learning. That's what these books try to do. My books are trying to teach children to have that emotional intelligence at a very young age, but it's so hard for them to really understand it. And if they don't understand it, well, if the parents don't understand it, how do we fix the world that we're in now? What is the answer? Who has the answer? Does anybody have the answer? I fear that this is a topic that could be every week for the next year, and we're never going to get the answer. But I think that we know what we need to do, but how do we do it?
Because Sean, I come to you in a sec, and I think we can fix it. We have to fix it, right? So but I think this is the mission that we're all on. All of us who do events, almost. We're trying to, we're giving little bits of our niche in terms of the answer to this question. Again, I truly believe. I talk a lot about achieving your greatness. Sean talk about being living your true life, your true self, right? And so I don't think many people are doing that. I'm not here to cast blame in that sense. It's more like this mindset principles have been there forever, right? And no one teaches us those mindset skills until now. They just it's like they were in plain sight, just not packaged that way. Say when I talk to Coach Sean, as I said, everything comes down to our identity at the end of the day, right? Who do we think we are? Who are we? Who do we believe we truly are? And many people are not living who they truly are. They're living the easy life, an easy street, whatever they are. In many ways, they're not learning enough. They're not seeking improvement. They're not seeking to serve others in a way that brings real fulfillment and real joy. So our kids are just seeing. Oh no, I would say our kids are seeing apathy. They're seeing struggle, which looks like, it looks like failure, but it's just struggle. And so, knowing what we know now, I think we can all do better. We can all truly find our joy. So I've welcomed everyone. I think Jim, welcome as well. Thank you. Said you were going to join, Jim. Great to see you. So glad you're here. Did I miss anyone out? So Prue, how you doing? Prue is my really good friend. She has a networking group. Do go along. So you have the responsibility to break generational curses. Isn't that so true, Prue? So good to see you. So now finance legend is here as well. Queen Leah, money, wealth mindsets and wealth builder supreme. That's who Queen Leah is. I know she is. Connect with her. Don't get ahead now. She got 2 new ebooks. So a new ebook, so 2 free ebooks now. How to build your wealth. Go and find out what I'm talking about. Connect with her and. But as she says, Coach Sean can speak to the point brilliantly. Yes. Whichever point, and I know the point she made. She made a point about pattern interrupt, to our thoughts. So, Coach Sean, please speak away.
Wow, it's like there's so many levels to go here. I agree with Prue, like what Felipe shared about he could have raised his kids the same way he grew up. And I know that struggle because my wife grew up in that, yell at each other till the problem was solved and then go shopping. Like my son looks at my wife and goes, "How can you be yelling at me 1 minute and then we're like, let's go eat ice cream or whatever?" She's like, "Because I just get it out and it's done." And I think part of the problem that we're seeing with a lot of mental health is because we don't know what to do with these emotions. We bypass them. We try to push them down. Like we've been conditioned that, you know, you shouldn't show your emotions. You know, this isn't the right place for that. But they're a core of who we are. And yeah, there's so much information, like keeping it straight. I agree with Paulette, Annie, that university is not a mandatory, and we've got to stop teaching that you've got to go to university. I get asked all the time about my son, who I believe, based on what I see, that he would not survive in a traditional or the modern school system, where they go to school and they sit in class and they have to sit quiet and listen to the teacher. He'd never do it, because I believe he has a lesser known type of neurodiversity. Like, a lot of times, we all know the spectrum and ADHD. This one is called, they call it gifted neurology. I think it's sometimes called E2 brains. And it's because, like, it's a constant hunger to learn, and the brain is just like firing so fast, staying focused on the thing you want them to is harder. If they lock in, they'll focus on their own.
Oh, yeah.
They don't fit the standard mold, like sit in class and listen to the teacher lecture. And I get asked all the time, because we homeschool him, well, what about university? I said, well, if he does a career that needs university, then of course I support him going to university. And he can go to university. There's nothing stopping him. But since he was 3, he used to say when he was 3, I want to be a dino fossiler. He now knows that that's paleontologist. And right now he's not sure if he wants to go archaeologist, because living in Guatemala, you know, there's a lot of archaeology sites, the whole Mayan civilization, or if he wants to go paleontology. But I support him either way. And I know that so often we go to university because that's what society, what culture, what our parents taught us, is that you're supposed to finish your mandatory school, go to university, get that job, work 20, 30 years, retire, and, you know, live life. I broke that mold. I spent 6 years in the Navy learning and experiencing a career that I never worked in again after I left the Navy. I got out of the Navy. I went to school for accounting. Never worked in accounting. Worked in several other jobs, went back to school and studied theology and psychology. Actually started a church and ran it for a year. Impacted a lot of lives. Now, did I work directly in any of those topics? Not really. Have they served me? Yes. But I think the disconnect is, we assume if we send people to college, they're going to develop critical thinking skills. They're going to develop those skills you talked about, Annie. But if their identity isn't right, if we haven't set them up right from the beginning, they could spend their whole career in school. I recently worked with a woman who, absolutely brilliant. She's a PhD. She's brilliant at what she does. She's a health practitioner. She has a high level of self-awareness. She's probably read most books than most people have ever carried on mind and healing. And she actually teaches the top head to toe mentality. Like, your health is also your thinking. She had every resource, every tool, insane amounts of knowledge, and she was stuck. And when I asked her what part of her identity might feel threatened if she stopped trying to carry everything, she went silent. And she said one simple phrase: I just wanted the pain to stop. And I felt like helping others was the only way to make that happen. There was an identity that was buried in her when she was young. It was the words of an authority figure that said negative things to her. And our children, Annie and I were talking about this earlier, whether we're a parent leading children, whether we're in a leadership position in our career or business, those we are leading are our mirrors. They will show us where we need to change. And I think as far as community and education, the biggest problem is we've monetized everything. We've made everything a transaction. Social media, yeah, it's great. Here we are connecting on social media, sharing ideas. But the undercurrent is that Microsoft makes money on this to get us to interact like this. Facebook makes money by keeping us on the platform, interacting with our friends, sharing pictures, FOMOing over this trip or whatever that someone shared. I think it's set us up. We have to kind of step back and go, I'm not playing that game anymore. And Paulette, if you ever want to have a coffee, come to Guatemala because we have the best. But I know the UK and the US and Guatemala, they're quite a distance.
Yeah, but you know that the interesting thing that, as you said, it's great that we have this facility, and we're not actually knocking this kind of interaction, because this is education. This is us educating each other. This is us learning from each other. This is us taking a little snippet here and there and letting it roll around in our minds, and then coming out with something that will be different and amazing. And going back to the mind thing, Ben struggled massively with school, massively, because he was high functioning. He would be finished before the next kid, so everyone would have 99p to spend in their little shop, and he'd go up to the shop and pick up something and take it off and come back, go back up to the front, get something else, and you'd deduct it from your 99p, and they would give Ben £9.99p, and he'd still finish first. And it just drove them mad, and I didn't know any of this. And it was only one day when he talked to us, I've said this before, he asked me what was my favorite cloud, and all I could think of was cumulus. Like, I know cumulus. I said cumulus is my favorite cloud, and he looked at me and went, really, you like cumulus? I was like, why, what's yours? And he said, oh, this, and it was the rain cloud, and he explained about it all and everything. And the next day he said to me, what's got more teeth, a shark or an alligator? And I went, Ben, what subjects are you doing? What topic are you doing at school that one day it's cloud and one day it's alligators and sharks? And he said, Mum, every afternoon I spend time in the library. I don't have lessons. They can't teach me anything, so I go and sit in the library every afternoon. So a child with social anxiety, communication issues, a child that has the big problems that he had was all about social interaction, was in solitary confinement in the library. And that was their solution to the problem. For Ben, it was wonderful. Libraries, books on flags, books on teeth, books on cloud, books on this. He loved the library. Library was like heaven to him. But it was only that he was put in solitary confinement in the library because they couldn't enter in the classroom. And so what we found out, he was, I was like, this is a kid with social interaction issues. He's got autism, and you know that the neurodivergence, as we call it now, is a big social issue, and you put him in solitary confinement, how does that help the child? Ben loves facts. I'm like, you think I don't know that? We've got 1,000 facts on every single thing you can think of. We've got books galore. But I want him to read fictional stories. I want him to read fun things and adventure stories, not fact stories, not fact books. And they're like, no, he likes the fact books. He knew every flag. He knew what currency. He knew the capital city. And I was like, yeah, this is a genius in terms of what you're seeing. But that doesn't help him become a better human being. It just makes him a machine for knowledge. And so when you talk about, does your child fit that rigid school thinking? No. I probably should have realized much earlier on how hard he was struggling. And then, we all know how bad it got with the bullying and everything. But the point I would say, and I say this from the bottom of my heart, is that when you talk to him and you say, Mum, every time you told me to look you in the eye, because eye contact was so important, he said, Mum, it was like because he could speak now as an adult, it was like somebody was putting pins in my eyes. That's what it felt like. And you were making me do that, Mum. You were making me look you in the eye. And I was like, but I thought it was the right thing to do. I didn't know then what I know now. Okay? I know now that if you look at my forehead, that looks like you're looking me in the eye, and that is fine. You focus on my forehead, we're fine. And I said, you go forward focusing on forehead. Exactly. That's it. That's all you have to do. Do not think about the middle eyes, I call it. And I used to make him laugh. And now as an adult, we can have that conversation. And I can now write. If a person asks me about eye contact, I say, don't force it. Don't force it. Don't make them. Tell them to look above the eyes at the forehead. Then the person thinks they're looking at them in the eye. Ben would be looking out the window, watching something, daydreaming or whatever. They'd ask a question, he would answer it because he was able to still be in the room and be present, but he was also looking out the window. They would say, no, you have to face the front. Well, he really struggled with that focus, right? What they said to me was, you need to tell him he's got to face the front. And I was like, I don't understand what he knows the answer and he's still paying attention. And they said, because other children will try to do what Ben's doing and won't be able to focus. So we can't have them copying Ben. And it was like, okay, he doesn't fit this mold, right? Because other children might copy him and they might not get to right. Therefore, he's the one that's has to fit into what everybody else is doing. And we learn over time. And it's got so much better in some ways because people are so much more knowledgeable. But SEND education has gone down the toilet because there's no money for them. There is no money to educate children in the classroom for SEND education. And so people are having to fight like Billio to get any sort of support. We had to pay for it because he was at a private school. We had to pay for his support. That was okay. We both worked and we were able to do that. The point I'm really making is that we tried to make Ben fit a mold that he didn't fit. He's now his own man. He's 22 years old and he's very funny. He's great at quizzes. Surprisingly, they love him in a quiz. Everybody wants Ben in the quiz team because he's remembered everything that he had, every flag that he's ever seen, every currency, every this, every that. He doesn't even the clouds. I mean, we've laughed about the clouds now. He said, "Mum, is cumulus?" I said, "Yeah, the only one I remember." But the point I'm really getting at is that not fitting into the educational mold is one thing. If we can get the educational mold to be more willing to get into the teaching of emotional intelligence and teaching of mindfulness and mind wellness and practices, and having perhaps a morning meditation or a morning breathing exercise before they start their day, then perhaps leaving their phone in that box won't be so hard to cope with, right? If we can get children to learn that their breathing is the thing that they can always return back to, then as they go through a panic attack or they feel something that they've not felt before, an anxiety that hits them suddenly, they can breathe through it and then go and talk to someone about it. Because the thing that I teach and have been begging people to teach for years now is to speak to someone. Speak to an adult that you trust. Whatever the problem, just verbalize it. Because do you know what? Once you've verbalized it, the weight comes out the rucksack. You know, the weight you're carrying that's holding you down, it comes out. That's the same principle with adults. You know, I might teach it to kids, but I would use exactly the same thing to an adult. There's not that many differences. But if we teach it early enough, we catch it early enough, we make a difference. And I feel like them taking the phones away from them, maybe we might even get them to social media might be 16-year ban. They were saying Australia, there's about 40% of kids are still working around it. Through help with their adult parents are helping them work around the ban. Because that makes sense, right? But anyway, let's not go there. So even if we got 60% of the kids off the phones or off of social media, I'll take that as a win, right? But the big issue for me, and as I say, I really, I'm banging on about it, is community. When I grew up, if we saw there was 2 bottles of milk on Mrs. Guppy's doorstep, we knew Mrs. Guppy was ill, right? Because she always took her milk in. I don't know that we would even notice milk on a doorstep. Milk doesn't get delivered anymore anyway. We buy it at the supermarket. So we've lost our milkman. So we wouldn't know anyway. Let's say post or is sticking out the letterbox. Who would care enough to go and knock and find out? They're the questions that I want answering. Any ideas, Eddie?
Well, and you make some perfect illustrations. I think part of the challenge is, you talked about Ben didn't fit the mold. My son doesn't fit the mold. What if none of the kids fit the mold? We've got to stop trying. Yes, implementing meditation and breathing techniques. Teaching kids intentional breathing. It's very valuable. You talked about your 5 things. We had a big earthquake, and my wife went into a full-on panic attack. Like she was like losing it, full-on anxiety, because it was a 7 point.
Ooh.
Buildings fell. I said, "Tell me 5 things you can see. Tell me 4 things you can smell. Tell me 3 things you hear." And I just went through the senses. As we said, as Leah pointed out, it's a pattern interrupt because our mind gets in this loop. It's like the old days. I remember listening to LPs, and it would start skipping, and we just kind of bump the machine, and it would jump and continue playing. And of course, today's generation has no clue because it's all digital. There's no skipping. We even had a little bit with CDs where it would skip, but you couldn't bump it anymore. But I think we've turned to this whole convenience culture, this individualistic. You talked about, nobody would notice Miss Guppy's 2 bottles of milk sitting. I remember when I left California, I lived in a neighborhood, and every morning the garage door opened, the car left, the garage door closed. In the evening, the garage door opened, the car entered. Those people I never knew, even if I, being an outgoing social person, tried to get to know them, they were in their fortress. And I've seen it getting, I live in Guatemala where there's still, well, where I live now, it's not really there. There's 100 houses here, and everybody just kind of takes care of their own, focuses on me, 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 me. And I think that's where we've lost it. And of course, this transactionalization of education, of our social interactions, you know, um, more the overload of dopamine hits that we have from social media and tech, and like you said, this is a little drug that everybody's carrying around. And today, most people would be more distraught if they can't find their phone than if they can't find their car keys or their wallet.
True.
And you asked a question earlier, what can we do? I think it starts at home. You illustrated it, Paulette. Your son needed extra support. You and your husband stepped in to give him what he needed, to give him the right environment, at least at home. When he went to school, and I think it also illustrates the other thing. If we just send kids to school to get through school, whether it's primary school, high school, or even university, we're doing them a disservice. I have striven with my son to get a love of learning. There are something, give him math. He's doing 6th grade level math. He's doing linear equations. He was doing some, I think it's engineering or physics. He's like, Daddy, help. I'm like, what is that? Like, I don't even know what this, because it's like a bunch of bars with weights and sub bars. And I'm like, I had to go Google it. Like, what is he learning here? Because I have no idea what he's doing. And he loves it. Like, he just eats it up. He's adding and subtracting integers. And, with Ben, with his facts about the clouds and the flags, he had a love. It had a desire for it. Get my son to sit down and write a story, it's a fight every time. Anything to do with writing, and it's like, it's going to take twice as long. But give him math, give him something more gamified, boom, he's in. And as far as the breathing, it's funny. My wife told me I was gone on a trip, and she was kind of agitated. He's like, Mom, Dad would say, do your breathing. Do your belly breathing, Mom. And to me, that's a win, that because we practice it every night before he does his deep, slow breathing to help regulate and reset. And he knows how to use that. Although he fights me sometimes when he's in a full emotional charge, he fought for a long time. I don't need this breathing. What are you telling me breathing? It's not going to help. But now he's realizing it does help.
I was going to just put on a quick note there. Ben had that same problem with the ability to write a story, because a blank sheet of paper to him was the scariest thing in the world. All right? Give him a science question or a maths question, whatever, but a blank piece of paper, scariest thing in the world. And I remember that all the class had started writing their story, and Ben was still sat there with his blank piece of paper. And the teacher came over and she said, "What's the matter?" And he said, "I don't know where to start." So she said, "Right, okay, spidergram, turn the page over." So he turned the page over and he did a spidergram, just do a spider with lots of legs. And he said, right, she said, right, what are the characters? Who's in the story? Where do they go? What do they find? Or what are they looking for? How far do they travel? How did they get there? And the conclusion of the story is did they find what they were looking for, and did they get back? How's that? And he was like, okay, I'm off. And he was off.
And my son was the same way. He's like getting the movement going, and we've done spidergrams, and he's got a guide like the hook and the sequence words, and when he actually just does it, he writes some, he comes up with some really creative ideas, but it's getting that.
Oh yeah, I mean, he
Fire
also had the other thing, Sean, was the right with I've said this story before, but they were drawing a rocket ship, okay, and he sat there and he's looking at this blank piece of paper, going, how do you make a spherical shape on a piece of paper, right? And
Because
so
he's
he
seeing
picked.
it in
He
3D.
wanted to roll the paper up, you see, to make the rocket. And she's like, what are you doing? You're supposed to be drawing on it. And he was like, yeah, but I'm trying to make the rocket. And she's like, no, just draw it. And he was like, I can't do it. And then eventually she realized that his mind is in 3D. He's not capable at that age, at 6, 7, of drawing in 3D. So he has to make that into 2D or 1D. And that is so much harder for him to understand, because she just drew like a sort of spherical shape and said, right, now turn it into a rocket ship, just to give him a clue to get going. He would have been there to the end of the classroom trying to think, but if I roll it up quick and make it into a shape, will it, how do I get an end on it? He would be trying to think of what he could do to that piece of paper. And we talked about that not long ago. And he said, they never ever explained things like that, Mum. They never said, your picture will be flat, because we're not making a real rocket ship. It's as if you're looking at a rocket ship. He said, if they'd have explained it like that, I'd have been able to draw a rocket ship, right? But
And
that
illustrates the point. Learning of choice and adaptive, because I struggled most of my life with starting writing. I remember in college I had a paper due on a Friday, and I started writing it that morning. And then like I got past the point of resistance, and things were like, the words were just flowing. And I typed the last word and hit save as my alarm went off to go to the campus and go to turn this paper in. And I just stopped, and I'm like, I wish somebody, and I failed the written in school. We had to take a math, reading comprehension, and a essay test, and they were required to graduate high school in California. First time I took it, aced the math, aced the reading, failed writing. Went to a new school, got the magical teacher who taught me a different way to approach writing that kind of unlocked for me. Took the writing test, passed it. Changed schools again, all the records were lost, and I had to take all of them again. I think that's, like I said, the mold is the problem. Life has evolved, society has evolved so much. We're in this info age, AI age, where whatever you want to know, it's right there. You just ask a question and boom, you got an answer. You want to know why the sky looks blue? Type it in the right tool, boom, you got an answer. With at whatever depth, 3D, scientific, physics, quantums, whatever level you want, it's available. And we're overwhelmed. And if we're overwhelmed as adults, imagine these young minds who are thinking in 3D, and nobody's explained to them how to take that 3D thing and make it 1D on a sheet of paper. I think that's where we change it. And it starts with educating our own circles, our kids, the people we interact with, and seek an ROI. And when I say ROI, I mean ripples of impact.
Yeah, I like that. I like the idea that if it could start with children, and I hope it can, and we can create that ability to, where they like to read, they want to read, they want to pick up a fiction book like the Jack and Mortar series. They want to pick that book up. They want to learn. They want to read. They want to understand what's making them feel this way. Why am I so nervous about school? Why am I getting the jelly belly worries? If they can get to the point where they can pick a book up that answers a question, they'll always pick a book up that answers the question. And then they can share that knowledge as they grow older with other kids. And I'm so convinced that we have to change something. I don't know exactly what, because I'm not a genius, but something has to change. We need to get back to community. We need to get back to caring about society, and we need to get back to caring about our own. And that means taking responsibility away from the gadgets and re-engaging with ourselves. Any, what's your words? He's nodding. Or are you watching Spurs?
No. That's all right. Spurs. I told you Spurs would do what Spurs are going to do. I don't play for them anymore. I wish I ever did, right? No, I think there are a million ways to develop those, to get those thinking skills. No, it's not just from school or university. I think that's probably the one thing, again, I'll take away for sure. Talking to a coach, having a therapist, and having a sounding board. I'm saying there's many ways. Reading books. There's ways that we can learn and keep up, and that's what we ought to do. Let me do a few comments, and I'll come to Cyrus, because he's come back. So I'd love to know what you want to add to the conversation. If we had more dinner times, we'll solve so many of these challenges. Fantastic share. Paulette says Queen Leah, so true, right? But again, Philippa was talking about the blue collar jobs, dirty jobs. Again, I can't help but think we've missed the whole growing up path. You start at the bottom, you work your way up. Not become a YouTube star on day one, and then and then you have to bypass ever having to work ever again. I don't know where it's gone wrong. That's what's gone amiss. I don't believe in forcing people into university for the reason Queen Leah says and you two have mentioned. If my child wants to go to university, and I've got 3 kids, only my youngest is even more interested in going to university, because he has a brain, so he has the ambition to do something academic. So the other 2, they're quite happy living a happy life. There's no point forcing them. It has to be the person's choice. I think you have to choose to want to. You have to be curious enough to want to learn, to want to, do something. What's in archaeology, paleontology, same thing. I'm saying.
But then if there isn't the job at the end of it, are they not just delaying the lack of job? Is it not?
No.
I believe that it's almost a bit of a con that the government sends you all the kids to university and college. That way you don't have to include them in the unemployment numbers. I think there is an element of that.
Hold on. The government's not sending your kids to college. You're sending your kid to college.
No, Tony Blair started it all. He wanted all the kids to go to university.
Yes, but you can't blame the government for that. They want everyone to go and learn, to become, brains rather than brawn. You can't blame the government. It's like,
We
that's
need
it's
brawn. We need brawn, and we need
Yes.
houses built, and we need electricians, and we need plumbers, and
all
we need
that.
other
Cool.
things.
And here's the thing, guys. I would say right here. Yes, the employment issue is a real thing, right?
Is
And a college degree is not the answer, right? Like, yes, there are jobs you have to have a college degree. They won't even look at your CV without it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's a story from my past. My cousin has a master's degree in marketing. She's working for a company as like the head of marketing for this small company. My wife has no college degree. She's working at the bank in corporate, and she's making double what my cousin is making. And she doesn't have the debt that my cousin has. Now, where's the disconnect? It's in the identity of the person, because if we teach the kids or people that, one thing I've learned in my experience, I've worked as an electrician, an administrative assistant, a facility engineer in telecom, a building automation programmer. I had my own home repair handyman business, ran restaurants, managed Burger King. It goes on and on and on. But I think you said this earlier, Annie. It's about stitching together. Like, I know Annie's got a degree in psychology. He's not a therapist. He's not operating as a therapist. But it's about teaching those that were responsible, that we're serving, and understanding ourselves is to look at, like, what can I... Felipe said it, right? He studied something, and it's criminology. He's like, but he uses it. So it's about, Annie, you and I talked about this. Knowledge is great. Without application, it's useless. So how do we teach others to take the things you learn, whatever degree you studied, whatever subject you studied, and glean the wisdom and how to apply it over here, where you do have the job?
And have the self-belief as well, because without that self-belief and confidence, which is what's lacking as well with anxiety and all those issues, confidence is at an all-time low, self-belief is at an all-time low. People are letting all the negative self-talk destroy them, and you know, we are living in a world of anxiety, and until we change that, me personally, I think that if we could embed self-belief in these children, young people, adults, teenagers, all of them, they all need to be loved and cuddled and told that they're perfect just the way they are, and now let's fix it. Right? You know, we need to fix it. We do. Every single person needs to be loved, cuddled, and told that they're perfect.
You're
and that
perfect in every way, but let's fix
every
you.
way, but let's fix the bits that you're not so sure about, because we can, right? And if you approach life like that, I mean, that's how I approach life. It doesn't matter what you throw at me. I just go, okay, that's what you're throwing at me this month. That's what you're throwing at me this year. Okay, I'll deal with it, you know? And then I deal with it, and then I move on. And that is how I am. And I can see that if everybody had that attitude, people would be in a much better place. Really. I really believe that. And therefore, if we can teach young people self-belief, to trust that they can do it, and they will do it, and they will be successful in whatever it is they end up doing. It doesn't matter what that end goal is, they will be successful in it. And if we believe that, it's huge.
Let's make that our next topic. Let's talk about self-belief, shall we?
All right.
how do we develop it, and why, how, and all
Yeah,
that.
and let's expand that, Annie. You know me, because self belief is cognitive.
Mm,
You and I talked
yeah.
about it this morning.
We need the emotional side too.
Self trust
Mm,
is somatic, and
yeah.
it comes from the identity level. And I think that's the other key is often I hear like we feel like whatever my personality is my identity, and that's my lot in life. But I would
Mm,
say that it is malleable and we can craft it
Yes.
however we like.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah. Please make sure you're available next, not this week, 2 weeks' time. We'd love you to be here, Sean, please. Huge support. It's been great. It's been a really good conversation.
Two,
And
two and a half,
let's,
2.5 hours in.
Half
Colin.
hour.
well, Annie, that's good for us. You know us. You know us. Cyrus, do you want to have the last word quick? Because we got to shut shop because Eddie's got another room.
Yeah, about 3 minutes.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone.
You got 3 minutes before he
I
needs
really enjoyed whatever I actually caught from the show, which was only a few minutes, but I loved it. Thanks, Sean, and thanks for your fantastic shares as well. You, Annie, and Paulette also. So, when you were talking about gifted kids, Sean's and also Paulette's, I got a feeling that Ben, the current version of him, is the future of Sean's son. And these kids, I was one of them as well. These kids are gifted in a way, right? And they might be told, "Oh, you're doing it wrong. You're not like the rest of them. Um, you're the black sheep of the family, etc., etc." But um, they're being bombarded by different tactics to
Mm,
tell them you're different because uh, being different causes phobia for a great population of the society, right? When you're different, you cause phobia for it. It causes some sort of anxiety. I don't know how to deal with you, right? So let's put you in a different category. Let's put you in this box. It's empty. Let's put you in that box, right? So, but you forget about the fact that these gifted kids are the children of indigo, right? Back in the day, the approach was different. The outcomes we were achieving was different. We were looking at these kids as gifted, and we would allow them to um, blossom into whatever they needed to blossom into, right? Um, let's not forget these gifted kids are the ones who think differently because they ask different questions, and they um, do this correction process in in us as a civilization, right? So everybody else is doing everything else. They forget about the trajectory. These kids, because of the nature of the questions they ask or how they ask it, right? They determine the trajectory. Let's not forget that. Now, the moment we call them special needs, automatically we change the supposition into you are a burden of some sort, very politely, right? And very calmly and mildly, right? We put them in that box of, I don't know how to deal with you. Let's medicate you, right? Let's put you in on a different path compared to the rest of the kids, right? So then it's them against us or us against them, and it creates this kind of divide, which is very, very unnecessary, right? So if they are serving the society in a different way, why shouldn't they be um, why should they be punished for it, right? So, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. Big Pharma says Give me a reason to medicate you, and we give it them, right? So I think these kids deserve a little bit of appreciation. Um, every once in a while, if you're driving, you pull over and stop driving and take a look around and enjoy the nature, right? So I think we should do that every once in a while. Stop treating them as people who have special needs and they are a burden in a certain way, right? Give them the freedom that they need once, twice a week. Prisoners in prison are given certain liberties and certain types of special hours, so they can feel a little bit free. Why not these kids, right? So they're not prisoners. So in my personal view, and by the way, I'm only human. I could be right, I could be wrong. Please do correct me if I'm wrong. But we need to remind ourselves that these kids um, are kind of the touchstone, the criteria, whether we're doing it right or doing it wrong, because everyone's too busy in their hectic lives without knowing that if the direction they're going is right or wrong. You could set off a journey, and if you get it, if you're a pilot, if you get it 2 to 3 degrees wrong, and you start the journey from the United States, instead of Germany, you could end up in, I don't know, in Nigeria or in Japan, right? So 1 to 2 degrees. These children of indigo, these are those mechanisms that stop us from getting it wrong. So we should give them a little bit more, pay them a little bit more attention, and give them a little more freedom. Thank you, guys.
I'm actually going to add that to the self-belief conversation, because I think even calling children special educational needs or neurodivergent as the latest, the names change on a weekly basis here. I think also, from what I can gather from various states in America, the pots that got stolen first or used first were the special education needs pots. They're the ones that get emptied first. The same with the UK. There's never the funding for these children that need something extra. And the one thing that I remember Ben has said to me, and I talk to him now about things like that happened, and I just a very very quick example, Annie. He said to me once, "I hate being different. Why did you make me different?" Right? And that was like a knife to the heart, right? Why did you make me different? I said, "Who said you're different?" People. Well, who? What people? Who people? People in my class. I said, well, why do they think you're different? Who's making them think you're different? Are you acting different? No, but the teacher told them I was different. I said, how come? She needed her iPad fixing. She asked me to do it. So Ben fixed the teacher's iPad. He went back in after break and he went to check the iPad to make sure it was still factory resetting like he'd set it up to do. And a child came in and said, "Miss, I caught Ben hanging around your desk." And Ben was like, "Yeah, I was checking your iPad to make sure I'd fixed it right." And she was like, "Ben, don't go near my desk when I'm not in the classroom. You know that. That's the rule." And he was like, "I was fixing your iPad." And it was like, talk about confuse the poor kid. It's okay to fix it when I'm in the room, but it's not okay to fix it when I'm not in the room. And these girls were like, hee, we got Ben in trouble. And that's what made Ben feel different. And so I said to him, you know what happens now? He said, what? I said, the next time she says, can you fix my laptop or computer or my iPad? No, I don't know how to. But she'll know I can. No, just say you can't. I'm not allowed. My mum said. Right? That's where these differences appear. And if you think about it, SEND, as they call it, special education or neurodivergent or whatever you want to bloody call it, at the end of the day, there isn't the money to support the children that need the extra help. But there's also so many more children who need that extra help because of anxiety. Anxiety has put these kids in that box now. So it isn't just the children who are educationally different or learning differently. It's this huge swathe of anxiety as well. So I'm going to put all that into that pot of self-belief, self-trust, identity, and special educational needs, and how we help develop children to have that self-belief. And if we can start at that young age, maybe there's a chance we can save society.
One child at a time, Paulette.
One at a time. That's what we say. One at a time.
And have you guys ever wondered that this could be the teacher's problem, and the teachers are a little bit special needs because their need is to learn how to resolve the matter.
We need to go. Right,
I'm
everybody,
7 minutes late
listen,
already.
huge thank
I'll
you.
try and wait.
I really appreciate
Thank you, guys.
it. Bye.
Right.
Thank you, Annie.
Go
Thank
to
you.
Pru's networking. Pru wants to see you there. I'll probably be there as well. The link is in the chat, so do go along for sure, right?
Okay, we'll go see Pru.
Right.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Take
Bye.
care.
Sorry, I'm Harry, so bye, everyone. Great conversation, though. That's someone said in the comment. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Let's go. Right.
She retrained her heart to heal the young, turned her passion into purpose, work begun. Co-author of a movement, not-for-profits gain, teaching kids that self-belief can ease the pain. Every child deserves to face their fears with measured thinking, not just